This past weekend was the 10-year anniversary of me setting the Cannonball record along with my co-driver Dave Black and our support passenger Dan Wong. And it was really just an invitation to me to look back on what that decade has meant in my life. And really now it puts the record at the center of my sort of Cannonball experience because it actually began a decade prior to that. I was still in high school and I didn't grow up in a family that loved cars. I wasn't wrenching on cars in the garage with my father or my grandfather or anything like that. I grew to love cars through friends that loved cars and through exposure to automotive media. And in consuming a lot of automotive journalism of the day, you saw the Nürburgring times and the hot lap times and the 0 to 60 times, but I came home one day after being totally distracted and reading car magazines through the entirety of my school day in high school, and I was talking to my dad. I said, what would be really, really cool is if they put a bunch of capable drivers in some really impressive cars, and we just saw who could drive across the country the fastest. Because I cared about what the ultimate road trip car was, and my dad looked at me and goes, oh yeah, Cannonball, that sounds like you, which of course began the spiral into learning everything that I possibly could about the actual events, about the movie, about Brock Yates, and just going down the rabbit hole. I really thought that I wanted to become an automotive journalist, and I did a research project on the career of automotive journalism, and I did an interview with Brock Yates. I called the front desk of Car and Driver and said, hey, I'd like to speak to Brock Yates, and she said, well, he doesn't work out of here, but here is his home phone number up in Batavia, New York. I was able to get him on the phone, and he was very cordial, very nice, and among the other things that we talked about, I said one day I wanted to set the Cannonball record. So this would have been in 2003. And I was, entering my senior year of high school, and I just thought that's where I want to go one day. And I had no idea how one might set the Cannonball record because there was no demonstrated precedent of what Cannonball looked like in a modern context. At that point, the record hadn't advanced since 1983. Brock had released his book in 2001 and had pretty much said in the epilogue that he did not believe any advancement on the record was actually possible. There were twice as many people in the United States, there were twice as many police working to patrol the roads, and the penalties for getting caught were so much harsher that he didn't think anyone would actually be crazy enough to try. And so as my final question was, I want to do this, do you think it's possible? And he really did say, no, I don't. But Brock was always a nice guy and he loved talking about Cannonball. And so that really set the course, not in a particular direction, but just generally migrating my life towards Cannonball because there you had to solve the car, the preparation, the team, all the things. And I didn't have any money. I didn't have the right car. I just had the dream. And so in the 5-year anniversary video that I made back in 2018, I talked a lot about how that vision, how that team, how that dream came together and got really to the point of the record and a little bit of what happened afterwards. But in that 10 years, you think about it, I was 18 years old and I set the record when I was 28. That is the hardest window of most guys' life. You're trying to figure out who you're going to marry, where you're going to live, what you're going to do with your life, how you're going to grow, and who you are going to be. And this became kind of that beacon, that idea that was always in the background of my existence. And when I got to the finish line in 2013 at the Portofino, it was really the finish line of me becoming who I wanted to be, especially as it pertains to the automotive hobby. Because look, I'm a Christian, I'm very public about that. What I care about most is using whatever platform I have for God's glory and for evangelism. But we also have to live in this world and do worldly things. And as I wanted to be a car guy, I wanted to be recognized as a car guy, and I wanted an automotive challenge that really illustrated what I mean when I say that I love cars. I've talked about that we all say we love cars, but that means something different for each of us. This was a way to solve a challenging problem, prepare a car in the right way, identify all the things that were going to stand in my way, and build the right team to overcome it. All of those things, as it circles around the automotive hobby, are what I wanted to be known for, and it really just became the perfect resume item. Now, my vision in going into this was just to hopefully have one magazine article to frame and put on my office wall of whatever real job I needed to have for the rest of my life. I never had any vision that Cannonball was going to be this entry into anything. It really was the finish line of the journey for me. Now, at the time, I was still selling cars at Lamborghini Atlanta, and I would continue to do that for a couple more years. But in the month to follow, my wife and I, who had been putting off having a child until after this goal was dispensed with, we did actually get pregnant. And so about a year later, my son was born. And at that point is really when I started to write my book about the Cannonball record and really start to organize what it meant to me and not necessarily about where it might go from there. Because I had no idea. I was amazed at the traction that the story got. We released it a couple weeks after we set the record, and we actually had the first first article on Jalopnik written by a good friend of mine, Doug DeMuro. In fact, I had spoken to Doug about possibly being my co-driver, but he was nervous about having to remain on Jalopnik's press car insurance, and he wasn't sure that it was actually the way that he wanted to do it. And I can certainly respect that because at the time, Doug was planning, or at least exploring the idea of an attempt at the Cannonball record. He was able to release the first very comprehensive article about the record, and it went on to be almost verbatim repeated on CNN.com. It was their most viewed story internationally that day. It made the rounds. I think I was on television like 500 times and a bunch of radio interviews and podcasts and things like that. And so it was so much fun to have that kind of in the wake of it. Of course, that didn't really produce any business opportunities. And even people that look at me today that might say, well, obviously Cannonball was what allowed the YouTube channel to grow. That was absolutely not the case. What really happened is that after we set the record, I started to be contacted by all the people that Alex Roy used to be contacted by. Because in that time where I was trying to plan and learn what it would look like in a modern context, we saw Alex Roy and Dave Maher set the record in their M5, and we saw Richard Rawlings and Dennis Collins in the 550 Marinella. So I had two great examples, and I knew that they had all received a lot of inquiries and questions and ideas about others that wanted to try to set the record. And after I was publicly known to have the record, those all came to me. And so I started to build a Cannonballers community. I obviously invited the other guys in, and Brock Yates Jr. and some of the guys that were still alive from the 1970s runs. And so we were able to start to build this family, or this fraternity of lunatics as I came to call it. And since then, that has been an amazing part of this channel and of my life. But when we started the YouTube channel in 2017, which was a year after I had started the app along with Dan Wong and Dave Black and some more of our friends, the VINwiki app, we were trying to figure out how to tell the world more about Cannonball. Whatever success the VINwiki media brand has had, much more of it could be attributed to finding stolen Lamborghinis, hunting for the El Chapo car, buying a Lamborghini from a prostitute, than from Cannonball content. I am very, very happy that over time we've been able to earn some viewership for that Cannonball content, but that was never a given, and it was a very uphill battle from the start. I mean, for a long time, Cannonball videos got 10% or less the views that we might expect from something on a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, or a McLaren, or something like that. And so over time, the community has grown. People have claimed a lot of other records, especially through COVID. We saw just an explosion of people going out and setting unbelievable times because there were no people on the road and there were barely any police working. And so I'm very, very proud of how many amazing drives have happened since then. I am most proud that we have continued to maintain the reputation of safety that the event has always had since 1971, meaning no accidents involving other cars, no serious injuries, and that continues to today. And so as I look back on the last decade, on the friendships, on the evangelism of Cannonball that I've been able to have, and certainly of the elevation of my platform and the more people that I've been able to talk to about God, about goals, about things that I care about, it has been an absolute blessing and an amazing honor. And in the letter that I wrote to my son as the opening of my book, I talked to him about the fact that Cannonball for me was the perfect goal at the perfect time. And it really is my hope for him and for anyone that follows me that they're able to find whatever Cannonball is in their life. And to close this video out, I'd like to read that to you because it continues to mean an awful lot to me, and I hope that one day it means a lot to him. For my son, the most important thing in your life is your relationship with God, the recognition of the grace that saves me from sin rather than the works or good deeds that I may do, is what delivers me from eternal separation from God through the sacrifice that Jesus made to bear our sins. If I teach you only one thing in your life, I want you to understand that God loves you even more than I can. He sacrificed his own son so that you, me, and anyone else who asks can spend forever in paradise with him. I would, however, like to teach you one more important thing about our lives here on earth. This awesome God that we get to serve set a stage for humanity to exist upon. It involves a constant struggle between pride and benevolence, comfort and fear, and winning and losing. One of the coolest things that God ever did was build the world so that we could have great experiences, make a mark, and truly achieve something great. I want to tell you about a goal that came to define a significant portion of my life and where that journey to explore and eventually conquer that idea took me. I'm writing these first words sitting just a few feet away from you, and you're 3 days old. He's now 9 years old. We've talked a lot about cars, we've played with a lot of Hot Wheels, and we've had a whole lot of fun, and I hope that one day he's able to find whatever it is. It may not be cars, it may not be Cannonball. In fact, most days, I hope that it's not. But for anybody out there who's looking for that reason to keep going, that thing to push toward, and that dream to chase, I hope that you find your Cannonball. This month, we've got our 2 best deals ever back from Glossit. We've got their DIY ceramic coating kit, which is a $210 value, including their graphene ceramic coating, plus a bottle of their ceramic detail spray, which makes the application so easy an idiot like me can do it in my own garage. That's a $210 value for just $69.99. Or, if free is the better price, you can get a bottle of their award-winning detail spray for free. Just pay the shipping and handling. We've had to limit that, so I don't know how many are left, but check the links in the description below and find out which you can get. Either way, you're going to get some great Glossit goodness.